So now let's dig deeper into theory of change work. A couple reminders. Theory of change is the best tool when you're able to collect data about the situation, collect data about those preconditions you were looking for, and continue to use evidence and research that will help you be able to choose the right strategies. So I'm going to talk through a lot of the details about how you can do this and end with the best strategy that works for you to have the long-term outcome you're desiring. The theory of change, total concept of theory of change is totally based on evidence. Too often we find people create new ideas to address issues they see in the community. They could spend all their time sitting in an office and thinking, gee, what might be going on? What this strategy says, and theory of change planning says, is get out into the community, talk to the people who are experiencing the problem, people who can't be homeowners, collect that data and find out the facts. Study, do research, find other research that's been done that would help you better understand the underlying causes of the problem you're trying to resolve, and make sure that as you're going along the way, you're evaluating whether what you have been trying is working or whether you need to go back and rethink whether you're working on the right barrier or not. Task 3 is to realize that there probably are intermediate outcomes that you're working on. If you're working on changing a precondition, helping to bring jobs to the community that doesn't have any jobs, that in of itself is a legitimate outcome to focus your attention on, with the longer range outcome of increased home ownership happening over a longer period of time. So creating those intermediate outcomes is a totally appropriate kind of strategy for your theory of change. Focus only on a precondition that you think has the biggest chance of being able to drive towards that long-term outcome. For example, if you know the long-term outcome is just the people that live in that neighborhood are young, and if they age and get older and stay in that neighborhood, they will likely own a home just because of the normal life cycle changes that happen as people grow older and have more permanent jobs, etc. That's not necessarily a precondition that you need to work on. You should concentrate on others that need assistance and other kinds of strategies to be able to overcome them. So the next stage of this is once you've figured out what precondition you're going to work on and so what those intermediate outcomes are that you're striving for, you need to define what intervention strategies you're going to use. What is it? What are the tasks? What are the actions you're going to take to concentrate your efforts to be able to remove that precondition or address that barrier? Think about programs and activities that have already been proven. Think about whether what you're thinking about really achieves the precondition, reduces the barrier. Continuing to ask yourselves, are we really getting the best result we would like? And also try and find strategies where domino effects happen. What that means is that if you work on, let's talk about the child going to school. If you work on the child being able to get up every morning and wake themselves up and catch the bus, and they're in school every day, there is a linkage between school attendance and school achievement. And so that's a domino effect. So if you concentrate on the precondition or the barrier of them not waking up, you may actually be able to affect some of the other preconditions you've identified. So thinking through the keys to intervention success is a part of this whole planning process. You know, how are you going to make sure the intervention you're thinking about is likely to succeed? We're not going to spend a lot of time on this kind of thinking in the classroom, but I want you to know that this is part of what you have to consider as you're choosing the best approach. Choosing approaches that have been proven elsewhere, choosing strategies that have great evidence of likely success are criteria that you should be using to help think through the kind of intervention that you think will work. Task 5 is to make sure you're articulating your assumptions. Now, I've talked about assumptions a lot in class, and I've asked you to start being aware of your own assumptions. Assumptions are statements about something that are not based on fact. They're based on opinion, observation, myth, but there is not strong evidence, strong research that points to the accuracy of that assumption. So assumptions are things that you need to write down, and then you need to look at the information you're collecting to find out whether the assumption you have is correct. I might have an assumption that if I just give 10-year-olds a fancy electronic alarm clock, they will figure out how to use it and wake themselves up. That's an assumption. You can test that by giving alarm clocks to 10-year-olds and seeing what they do. That is a way of jumping from an assumption to proof, evidence, and a reinforcement of the strategy that you're taking. The whole theory of change has an element in it that's writing it down. Now, why is writing it down so important? The reason is that this is a fairly complicated kind of path that happens, and each step of the way you're collecting information and checking your facts, checking your assumptions, checking your thinking about whether this is a precondition, checking your thinking on which precondition it has a domino effect to get you where you're going. You need to write down at each stage of those steps what it is that you intend to do, why you've chosen that precondition, for example. And as time passes, you forget the rationale for that, or as time passes, you get new information. You want to be able to go back and change from an assumption to evidence that leads to the conclusion you're coming to. It also helps you to pass it to others. In any of these kinds of strategies, you're never working alone. And so being able to have other people understand the logic that you were using and for them to be able to share it with those around them will help you gather the people you need to be able to work on those barriers. So here's some specific free advice that often comes with doing theory of change. The first is focus. The more you can focus on a precondition, on a specific thing that looks like it may be that lever that's going to make the change, the more capacity you have to be able to influence the change you're dreaming about. The more specific you can be with the change that you're working on, the better. So specificity is your friend. Again, base it on facts, evidence, evidence, evidence. And expect it to be messy. Do it in pencil. Literally do it in pencil. Or keep version A, version B, version C, draft D, always sort of keeping this trend of history, because it might be that you find evidence now that requires you to go back 3 stages before this to revise your thinking on something. So here's the basic framework for why theory of change is so important. It has been proven to increase the effectiveness of effort. And when you're working on these complex community-based issues, it requires the effort of a lot of people. They only want to work on it once. So being able to use a theory of change process and to be able to use evidence as a strategy has been proven to get better results. It quickly gets people to a shared vision and a commitment to one another to work on what they are working on together. At the end of these kinds of planning processes and creating this is our theory of change, you'll get common commitment and the ability to be able to articulate what that strategy is as a group. It gives you an opportunity to align community resources around a common action plan. So one person might be working on distributing alarm clocks. Another person or organization might be working to help the public schools create a changed plan so the buses arrive on time. Another might be working on helping the mother figure out how to do a new kind of employment that increases her ability to be able to be home when her child is getting ready for school. So people will pick different preconditions that they work on. It also helps you frame the venture and the work that you're going to be doing to attract investors or attract funders. Be able to show these are the pieces of the puzzle. It gives evidence that you understand the issue in the community and helps them, teach them why you think you're working on the most important lever to make the change you're looking for. So that's the end of this piece. The next thing that we'll apply again is finding root causes by using the 5 whys. That's a different video. It's also something I will talk about in class 2 or 3 different times because it's a tool that we can use in many ways. And so for now, enjoy your theory of change planning, and we'll talk more about how this applies to the ideas you're working on when we are in class next.